You can knock out 10,000 crunches a day, live on celery and water, and run until your shoes are soaked through, and that belly can still sit there like nothing happened. That is the frustrating part nobody explains. Most people think belly fat is just stored energy, just extra calories sitting in a reserve tank waiting to be burned. But that idea is incomplete, and in a lot of cases, it is exactly why people stay stuck. Because the belly fat you are worried about may not be the fat you should be fighting at all. What if the soft, pinchable layer under your skin is not the real problem? What if the more dangerous threat is the fat you cannot grab, cannot flex away, and cannot isolate with ab exercises? Buried deep inside your abdomen is a form of fat that crowds your organs, burdens your liver, stresses your pancreas, and drives the kind of internal dysfunction that can quietly damage your health for years before you ever notice it. That fat is called visceral fat. And here is where it gets unsettling. You can look lean almost everywhere else. Your face can be slim, your arms and legs can look normal, and you can still be carrying a dangerous amount of this internal fat. There is even a term for that pattern, TOFI, which stands for thin outside, fat inside. In some ways, that can be more deceptive and potentially more dangerous than obvious obesity, because the risk is hidden. Now for the part that should get your attention. Although visceral fat is one of the most harmful forms of fat in the body, it is also highly responsive when you know how to trigger the right biological response. In this video, I am going to walk you through that response. We are going to break down a Japanese-style approach built around a specific pigment found in vegetables, a key compound in tea, and a 75% movement rule that has been linked to dramatic reductions in visceral fat, including one protocol associated with a 48% drop in just 2 months. So before you do another set of crunches or add more punishment to your routine, stay with me, because to get rid of this fat, you first have to understand what it actually is. Visceral fat is not the same as the subcutaneous fat on your arms or under the surface of your stomach. The fat under your skin is more like passive storage. It sits there quietly, like money parked in a savings account. Visceral fat behaves very differently. It is biologically active. It operates more like an endocrine organ than a harmless storage site. It releases inflammatory chemicals, disrupts hormone signaling, and pushes the body toward insulin resistance. That is why I want you to think of visceral fat less like padding and more like a parasite. It settles around your most important organs, your liver, your stomach, your pancreas, and it thrives in the exact kind of inflamed environment that makes your metabolism less efficient and your long-term health more fragile. So how do you get a rough sense of whether this may be part of your problem? Here is a simple self-check. Stand up and press into your midsection. If your belly feels soft, loose, and easy to compress, a lot of what you are feeling is likely subcutaneous fat, the kind most people think about in cosmetic terms. But if your stomach pushes outward and feels firm, dense, and tight, almost as if something is pressing from the inside, that can be a sign of visceral fat. That outward pressure is often what gives the abdomen that hard, rounded look, like you swallowed a basketball. That is not just a vanity issue. That is a warning sign. If we want to go after this internal fat, we need a 3-part strategy. First, we cut off the environment that helps it thrive. Second, we interfere with the pathways that help it accumulate. Third, we use movement to actively burn it down. And no, I am not going to reduce this to eat more vegetables and exercise more, because that is far too vague to be useful. We need to be specific. One reason visceral fat tends to stick around is that it thrives in a body under stress, especially oxidative stress. In simple terms, that means your cells are taking more wear and tear than they can comfortably handle, and when that internal stress builds up, visceral fat does well in that environment. That is where colorful vegetables come in. The deep orange in carrots, the red in tomatoes, the dark green in spinach. Those colors come from compounds called carotenoids. And those compounds help protect your cells by lowering some of that oxidative damage. This is not just a nutrition slogan either. In a Japanese study, people who increased carotenoid-rich vegetables like carrots and cabbage over 8 weeks saw meaningful reductions in visceral fat. Researchers believe these plant compounds help shift the body away from fat storage and more toward fat burning. So the practical takeaway is simple. Put more real color on your plate. Think carrots, spinach, squash, bell peppers, sweet potatoes. If most of your meals are built around pale processed carbs, you are feeding the kind of environment visceral fat likes. If your plate is full of bold natural color, you are sending a different message. Now let's talk about what you drink, because there is one beverage that gets mentioned all the time, usually in a way that sounds too simplistic to take seriously. Green tea. A lot of people hear that green tea helps burn fat and immediately lump it in with overhyped wellness advice, but the reason it keeps showing up is that it contains a class of polyphenols called catechins, and the one that gets the most attention is EGCG. Here is the simplest way to picture what is going on. Think of your fat cells as if they have a locked front gate. Under normal conditions, your body is not always eager to pull energy from those stores. Catechins appear to help make that process easier by promoting fat oxidation, and they do it partly by stimulating the nervous system in a way that helps the body mobilize fat for fuel. But that is only half the story. Catechins also appear to inhibit an enzyme called lipase. Lipase is involved in breaking down dietary fat, so your body can absorb it efficiently. So when you drink tea rich in catechins, it is almost like posting a guard at the entrance to your digestive system and telling it not to wave every gram of incoming fat straight through the gate. And again, there is research behind this. In another randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, participants who consumed catechin-rich green tea for 12 weeks showed significant reductions in visceral fat. Now here is where people mess this up. The benefit is not coming from those bottled green teas loaded with sugar that you grab at a gas station. That is not a metabolic tool. That is basically sweetened flavored water. If your goal is to help your liver and reduce internal fat, you want matcha or sencha because those forms give you far more of the actual tea compounds that matter. And there is a synergy here that makes the whole thing even more interesting. The caffeine works together with the catechins. The caffeine helps rev the engine, and the catechins help direct the body toward the fuel source. Now we get to the most important piece of the whole system: movement. Diet can reduce total body weight. That part is true. If you eat much less, your weight may go down. But when researchers compare the effects of diet and exercise, one pattern shows up again and again. While dieting tends to shrink the body more generally, exercise is especially effective at targeting visceral fat. So what kind of exercise are we talking about? Do you need marathons? No. In some people, excessive endurance work can drive up cortisol and become counterproductive. Do you need to become a powerlifter? Not necessarily. What you need is the right intensity. There was a meta-analysis covering 117 different studies, and alongside that body of evidence, there was a particularly striking protocol in an older study where participants cycled for 45 minutes just twice per week. And they did it at about 75% of their maximum aerobic capacity, meaning they were working hard enough to be clearly out of breath, but not so hard that they were completely exhausted or unable to speak. And the result is what makes this so compelling. After 2 months, they did not lose much total body weight on the scale, but their visceral fat dropped by 48%, almost half. On top of that, their insulin sensitivity improved by 41%, which is the kind of shift that moves someone away from the edge of prediabetes. That is why relying only on scale weight can completely mislead you. The number may barely move, while some of the most dangerous fat in your body is changing dramatically. So what does 75% intensity actually feel like in real life? You do not need a lab, a face mask, or a treadmill test to estimate it. You can use the talk test. If you are moving and you can sing without any difficulty, you are too far below the target zone. If you are going so hard you cannot get out a full sentence and feel like you might throw up, you are too far above it. The sweet spot is in the middle, where you can still speak in full sentences, but you sound winded. You should sound like you just climbed several flights of stairs. You can talk, but you would rather not. That is the zone. That is where visceral fat tends to respond. At this point, I need to warn you about the mistake almost everyone makes when they get desperate to lose belly fat. They slash calories. They try to live on 500 calories a day. They jump into OMAD, or prolonged fasting, with no preparation, no structure, and no idea how to support recovery. The problem is that severe calorie restriction eventually hits a wall. There is only so far you can push the body before it starts defending itself. Your metabolism slows down, hunger intensifies, and your system shifts into conservation mode because it thinks survival is the priority. In other words, the more aggressively you try to force fat loss through starvation alone, the more your body starts clinging to the energy stores you are trying to get rid of. Exercise behaves differently. A more recent paper in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that exercise had a dose-dependent relationship with visceral fat reduction. In plain English, the more you did, the more you lost. Researchers did not find the same kind of upper ceiling that shows up with dieting. A little exercise produced a little reduction. More exercise produced more reduction. It did not stall in the same way severe dieting often does. So the strategy is not to underfeed yourself into metabolic shutdown. The strategy is to eat enough nutrient-dense food, enough carotenoids, enough protein, enough actual nourishment to keep the body functioning well, and then use movement to create the deficit in a way your metabolism can tolerate and sustain. So let's put all of this together into a simple plan you can actually use. Step 1 is your antioxidant hunt. Look at your plate. If it is mostly brown, beige, or pale, change it. Add 1 serving of a deeply colored vegetable to every major meal. Carrots, spinach, bell peppers, squash. Those colors are not decoration. They are part of the signal. Step 2 is the liquid key. Swap your second coffee, sugary drink, or random afternoon beverage for matcha or green tea. Keep it unsweetened. If you want to add a squeeze of lemon, fine, but do not turn it into dessert. The point is to get the catechins, not drown them in sugar. Step 3 is the 75% solution. You need cardio, and yes, I know that goes against a lot of gym mythology, but for visceral fat, cardio matters. Aim for 3 to 4 sessions per week, around 45 minutes each. Bike, run, row, swim, hike uphill, or briskly walk on an incline. The exact tool matters less than the effort. Use the talk test. If you are not at least a little breathless, you are probably not in the zone. And finally, remember this: consistency beats intensity. The best workout is not the one that looks most impressive on paper, it is the one you can still do 3 months from now. If you hate running, do not run. Put on a backpack and walk. Go swim. Use a rower. Just keep your heart rate up and keep repeating the signal. Visceral fat is dangerous because it sits at the center of so many chronic problems, from metabolic disease to insulin resistance to cardiovascular risk. But your body is not helpless, and it is not broken. It is responsive, it is adaptable, it wants to move back toward health when you give it the right inputs. So stop trying to bully your body with starvation and random ab workouts. Start feeding it the pigments that protect it, the compounds that support fat metabolism, and the kind of movement that actually reaches the fat that matters. When you do that consistently, you are no longer fighting your body. You are finally working with its biology. If this changed the way you think about belly fat, make sure to like and subscribe.